Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. Great program today. You're really going to like it. Das Williams is with me, our county supervisor here in Santa Barbara, California. He is a great guy. He's a friend. He's got a great story. He has great insights. It's a powerful interview. Das Williams, The Good Life, is next. Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you've joined us. GoodLifeTelevision.org is where you can go to see some great interviews over the last year. Great stories, overcomers, entrepreneurs, public servants, firefighters, law enforcement, celebrities, youth. It's pretty much everything. But there's kind of one unifying common thread, which is they're inspiring. There's just so much good stuff, and that's really what we're doing here at Good Life Television is we're talking about the good stuff. Plenty of other people talking about the other stuff. We're talking about the good stuff. And so we encourage you to go to goodlifetelevision.org. There's full form interviews. There's also what we call power clips. So I hope you'll check it out. And today I'm really excited to be joined by a friend, a longtime friend, and our county supervisor here where we are sitting in Santa Barbara, California. Das Williams is with me. Das, welcome.
Thank you, Dean. Good to see you again. Good to see your new place.
Yeah, we're back. Went to Texas for 10 years.
Yeah.
We're back.
Yeah.
And we had connected, it's probably 15 years ago. You were, I think, pretty new on the city council. Mm-hmm. And we started having dinner together.
Yeah.
We had some great conversations.
That was a great blessing, man.
It was. It was good memories.
And just in case your viewers don't know where this is filmed, it's filmed in a neighborhood that I consider really the test of the county in the post-debris flow recovery. It's one of the last middle-class neighborhoods left in Montecito, and it was one of the ones hit hard. And man, you landed in a great spot because this is a wonderful, wonderful little neighborhood.
Yeah.
And in my mind, as it recovers, that's the test whether we did a good job or not in the debris
Interesting.
flow. Yeah.
Let's start there. Walk me through those days. So coming off the fire, what was it like for you? Where were you? What were you doing during that stretch?
Well, for the days and even 10 days or more ahead of time, it was a preparation for impending doom. We
Really?
just did, the scale of the doom was more than anybody, including the weather forecasters, could have imagined. We tried to raise the warning bells, let people know. I think I borrowed a line from Tom Clancy. It said there's a clear and present danger to public safety and health from this storm, and we set about cleaning out the debris basins throughout Carpinteria and Montecito, and that was a race against time.
Right.
They started with the big ones, and then flood control was moving down to the smaller ones, and even with just a couple days to go, we finally grabbed some of the smallest ones and cleared them out. One's even smaller than the ones out here in Montecito. But we had bizarre contingency plans if they weren't cleaned out, including I had a volunteer crew lined up for one of them.
Really?
We didn't end up needing it, thankfully, because the lawyers thought that was a nightmare. But
right.
And then, man, even after that level of preparation, it was far more than we could imagine. And the level of need, the level of tragedy, and how personal that tragedy was. As in case you have viewers that aren't from the area, we're a small community. Not everybody knows everybody, but everyone knows someone who knows someone, right? And so the connection, the impact on the student body at the elementary schools here, the impact for every family that lost a life, but not only that heart-wrenching one, but all their circle of friends and community members.
Sad.
And that hurt, and it hurt bad. But I also felt that it ultimately became a real test of whether the county government could react in an appropriate manner. County government is not known for its speed or its willingness to dispense with procedure to do good things. But in this case, county government really did, both in the run-up and the aftermath. And the community really rallied with such work as Habitat for Humanity and the Bucket Brigade, in particular, really stepped up and did incredible things. And those two tendencies met at the Montecito Recovery Center, which was for many months down the street from here, and linked all the services that the county provides and those that nonprofit entities were providing in an effort to help the community. And so we can't bring back the fallen, but we were able to help these communities recover.
What do you love about our community? With all we've been through, I mean, you have, from the city council to your role now as county supervisor, you're obviously in an important position, and you're at the heartbeat of the community, I think, and going to all the events, meeting the people. How would you describe, somebody who's watching this in Lincoln, Nebraska, what do you love about this community?
Well, Santa Barbarans, and I mean that in a big sense, people that live in Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, Montecito, Summerland, and Goleta, they're number one, usually willing to be better informed, which is not always a trait that all of our country is sharing right now. They're pretty well educated or very well educated, and they're regardless of economic class, in my view, much more willing to have a discussion and be better informed. And that's I think that's a blessing. We as a community, we're very voluntaristic, right? And this can be a double-edged sword, and we like to party. There's no place in the state of California that has more parades than Santa Barbara, California, for example. I mean, we outpace San Francisco maybe almost 2-1, which is the number 2 place with the second most amount of parades.
We're all about parades.
We
Did
love
you ever come
parades.
to my house parties out in Goleta? My Christmas party?
No, I should have done that.
Dan Aldrich didn't invite you to my Christmas party?
I'm sure I got invited, but back in the day when I was expected to be everywhere, Christmas parties was like,
it was a nightmare.
No, it'd be like one thing, doom, 3 a night.
So you may have come.
It kind of takes a little bit of the fun out of it, but post COVID, or if you manage to be able to do things outdoors, because I think we in the county are probably going to legalize gatherings that are small and outdoors at some point.
What's
here.
Small?
So the state has, in most communities, legalized home gatherings that are outdoors and that have 3 households or less, including the household that's hosting it.
It's a pretty small party.
That's a pretty small party.
Yeah.
Especially for what Santa Barbans are used to.
Right.
But those 3 things, those 3 factors, combine to be a community where there's a lot of, I guess if it was a foreign country, we would call it civil society, built up of civil society, where we support one another, we help one another, we know one another, we encounter one another. If you mix, your willingness to dialogue and your voluntarism and your willingness and your desire to party, which seems never ending in this town, that means you have encounters with one another, and that's a real asset.
That's community.
It is. It is community.
Tell us about your wife.
I will. I'll just end in one of my quote by my favorite dead white male, T.S. Eliot. If you've never read it, Choruses from the Rock, and he said, And now the stranger asks you. The stranger's capitalized, like allusion to Jesus. When the stranger returns, and asks, "Why do you live huddled close together?" Is it because what will you tell him? We live close together because we want to make money from one another, or because we love each other and we want to be a community. I think that's, that was almost 100 years ago that he wrote that, and yet it sounds like it was written yesterday.
Powerful.
And now we live dispersed on ribbon roads, and no man knows or cares who is his neighbor, unless his neighbor makes too much of a disturbance. Right? So I think that yearning for community is something that we need to struggle for in this day and age.
We're made to be together. We need each other. It's not good that man should be alone. These are pretty ancient truths.
Absolutely.
And it's important.
Yes.
We're getting very profound.
We didn't get through, thousands of years of history and millions of years of evolution by being exclusively individualists.
Right.
We're a tribe creature.
Right.
And our community is really important. And then I'll lead in to answer your question about my wife. My wife's doing good. She's a psychologist in one of our many communities, the American Indian Health and Service, one of our federally qualified health clinics here in town. She's doing that part-time, and then we were together raising two little girls, Yash, who's 5, and Kaya Rumi, who's 2. And they are amazing.
You're a girl dad.
I am totally a girl dad. I'm big into a girl dad.
Game over.
I always want, since I was 19, I wanted to be a girl dad.
Really?
Yeah, I'm one of those weird guys who even in college was like, oh man, I can't wait to have a daughter.
Really?
And it happened very late in life for me, but it worked out well. Yeah.
So good. How did you meet Johnny?
It's not very romantic. I met her while she was giving out H1N1 vaccinations. And if you're an elected official, like what things that you hate that normal people hate, like lines, those are like awesome for us, right? Because you always want to meet someone who's not like the usual suspects that show up every week at city council or board of supervisors hearings. And where else can you meet normal people than lines?
Perfect.
So I flock to lines. Anywhere there's a line, I want to hang out in line, whether or not I need a H1N1 vaccination or not.
Right. You wanna be in line.
And so I was hanging out with people in the line, and lo and behold, there was someone. If I was going to talk to somebody, I was definitely going to talk to her. She later told me that she had an overwhelming sense of doom come over her as she met me, and then therefore did her best to avoid me for a while afterwards. In our first encounters, and I was pretty soon had a sense of doom as well, though I was a little more enthusiastic about the doom than but doom overtook us, and we still think that it was God's way of saving both of our lives.
Wow, love it. How long have you been married?
Well, we got married a year later after we met.
Okay.
And so January 2011. So it'll be
9 years.
It'll be
almost 10 years.
Yeah, it'll be 10 years this
Wow.
January. Yeah.
Wow. Tell us about your visit to South Africa in 1994.
Okay. Well, I was a really I was a weird kid in general.
You're still kind of
like
weird.
I was not the popular kid. I was that weird kid in the corner doing stuff that people like, well, what is going on? and and that went from grade school and continued on. In grade school, I was that weird kid that was more concerned with, Alex Haley's Roots or Tolkien's books than I was with things that were normal at that age. And I was raised in a very schizophrenic family, from in politics and in faith. Half of my family were diehard leftists and atheists, and then half of my family were charismatics. For those that aren't familiar, evangelicals, squared, right?
Not steroids.
Right. So I definitely never had a problem having interesting conversations between people who thought differently, but it also meant that I was very politicized at an early age, and I viewed the struggle in South Africa as, one of the few places where politics wasn't so gray. At the time, I didn't value American democracy as much as I did afterwards, because sometimes to people here, politics can seem like, shades of gray as opposed to, good guys versus bad guys. And in the example of the South African struggle, liberation struggle, I looked up to it. And so when a young woman from Petaluma, Amy Beale, was killed in a little township called Guguletu, that made me realize, hey, if this, idealistic young woman from Petaluma could go there and put herself in harm's way for good, then a tough kid from Isla Vista can definitely do it. And so I went there when I was 19 and worked for Nelson Mandela's political party. I didn't want to go there as an observer. I wanted to go there as a participant as much as someone who's not from there could be. And
wow.
So I showed up at the ANC headquarters in Cape Town and said, hey, I've done an election in Isla Vista before. Give me a job. And they gave me a job for $20 a day, which you could live on at the time in
wow.
South Africa, and campaigned through the election, and then had a great experience afterwards going backpacking with a lot of Kabani, which is comrades, members of the ANC afterwards. And South Africa is a great place for backpacking too. You don't even need to have tents. They have all these like farmhouses that are 5 miles away from another farmhouse where you
really?
Can just stay. Yeah. You don't need to ever tent camp in backpacking in South Africa. But I would say that part of the experience that I had made me think a lot more about American democracy. I encountered people that may have been on the right side of history and the right side of the liberation struggle, but they had to pay a terrible price for political change. The guy who set me up everywhere had to be tortured in the infamous police station in Cape Town because he was operating a safe house for the ANC.
Wow.
A guy went backpacking, had to drop out of college and never had the experiences that many of us have to go fight in Angola, and some of my volunteers, they had killed people for the struggle.
Wow.
And that's a terrible price of the soul. And it made me reconsider my view about American democracy and go, a system where we don't actually have to be tortured or shoot people to create political change is pretty special.
Yeah.
So it made me get a lot more into political change and grassroots political work back in the States afterwards.
Wow. That is amazing. Did you really live in your van at one point in high school?
Oh yeah, it was. So I dropped out of high school when I was 16, and this was before I went to South Africa, and I wanted to be back in Santa Barbara because that's where I had found. I moved around a lot as a kid, but that Santa Barbara is where I found a real center of life. And lo and behold, like many people, I didn't have enough money to live in Santa Barbara, especially as a 16-year-old on his own. So for half of the year, I would live in my 1970 VW bus, and half of the year I could afford an apartment for a couple of years.
Really? You did that for a couple of years?
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
It definitely makes you look at homeless policy differently.
I bet.
And makes you realize that there's a lot more people that are homeless than we ever see.
Yeah. I bet.
Sometimes it only registers the people that live in camps or and are clearly what we would call chronically homeless folks. But there's a vast array of more people that are living out of their vehicles and are trying to blend in with society during the day, find places to take showers, go to work, and then come back to their car.
Yeah. So that experience probably tenderized your heart toward that community.
Well, and made me realize, how I would say most Santa Barbarans are 1 or 2 or 3 paychecks away from being in the same spot.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I didn't know that about your family. I knew that there was a split. I think it was your dad was in Isla Vista, your mom was in Ventura
Ojai.
Ojai. Yeah. Okay. So, but I didn't know about the kind of the religious or whatever you want to call it.
An ideological
divide or spectrum.
Yeah.
So do you feel like that has, how has that impacted your life in terms of, I don't want to make it sound like there are sides, but in a way, seeing both sides, relating to human beings with different perspectives. Is that?
Yeah, it very much affected me because in my family, there was a lot of examples, of Christians who were internally consistent, meaning their love was unconditional and limitless, the way that the way that the ideal of being Christ-like in that way was. And so discussion was totally cool, and debate was totally cool. And I was a little militant disciple of science, and maybe not atheistic, but pretty skeptical as a kid. And I would debate my grandfather just endlessly, and I would take out all the archaeological records, all of the things. I would just come with all my carbon-14, dating stuff, and I'd win every battle of those debates. And ultimately, because I became a believer when I was 17, my grandfather obviously won the war. I won every battle, but he won the war.
That is fascinating. That's really interesting. How did you come to faith? Other than your grandfather.
Well, a couple different things. It wasn't all connected with the church. I would say, like a lot of people that live here in Santa Barbara, a lot of my connection with faith was a realization of that we live in a world, in a construction that's so much greater than ourselves and so much greater than the human understanding. And for me, that was hit home one morning surfing really big waves at Halama Beach up in North County, and an incredible encounter with dolphins. And for a brief moment, I just saw the architecture of creation, and it made me like so certain for a few moments, just for a few moments, of the authorship of things. That, you know, if you can see architecture, there's an architect somewhere, and that maybe opened my mind. And so I you know, I'm one of these people that has been blessed with seconds of revelation, and so I think that there's a lot of people in this world who never are even blessed with that. Right. So I have held on to those seconds.
How does that happen for you? I mean, surfing Halama Beach.
Yeah. Well,
are there other examples where there's kind of been a light or something that's come?
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I mean, I personally think that it's hard for me to imagine having an experience of truly falling in love with someone without trying to understand the deeper dimension of divine love, of unconditional love, or being a parent. You know, I think it's not just, this isn't just biology, man.
Right.
You know,
right.
There's other substance here to the relationship that you have in love.
I always think about that quote. You know, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, or what was it? Not human beings having a spiritual experience. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, I even go so far. You know, I've gotten even. You know, I definitely call myself a believer or a Christian, but I've gotten a lot of connection to God from reading the Islamic Sufi saints, and something that they say a lot is they call God the Beloved, right? And they create a personal relationship that we see more akin to the way that American evangelicals view God, as that personal relationship, and they use that love both as a way to increase our understanding about the divine, but also make it more personal.
Your leader, the great Westmont president Gil Beebe, was here a few weeks ago. We were talking a lot about leadership. He wrote a book on leadership. I know I think you go to church with him.
Yeah, I love that guy. Yeah. And man, to me the best evidence of he and his wife's work is it's not just their personal work, but how much their daughters are disciples and doing great work in the community. Absolutely. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate extension of what you do.
Yeah, and we were talking about, he was kind of discipled in leadership under Peter Drucker, who's the father of modern management, is what they call him. But we talked a lot about leadership in that conversation. I was thinking about you this morning. Number one, just serving, holding on to service. But one of the things Dr. Beebe was talking about was that, and I know your job is probably full of problems. You're kind of like, probably feel like you're putting out fires a lot.
That's right.
but one of the things he was saying is leaders somehow find a way to get their focus off of the problems and onto solutions and vision and ideas and forward. How do you do that in your job? You've had a couple different jobs, and I'm sure you miss Sacramento deeply. But in your road here, how do you balance that with having to deal with incoming, having to put out fires all the time?
Well, I think sometimes the way I view myself is either as a technician or as a facilitator for technician, right? That people have fundamental problems. Something has broken down in society, and your job is to figure out a technical solution. And that, I would say, what's been more valuable to me than, I appreciate the education that I've had that's helped me be a technician. I'm a Bren School graduate, and so for environmental problems, I do have technical expertise. But even more than that, in my role, it's the understanding of who has even more expertise in a given realm of public policy, in a given and really trying to bring them into it. And in Sacramento, that meant finding in what smoke-filled corner the expert on certain policy matters was hiding. Here, it's a lot about understanding and trusting some of the technical staff that both county or various cities have, right? And having a good relationship and knowing their expertise, but also knowing their frame of reference, so you don't just take everything they say as unadulterated truth either, right?
Right. That's a discerning process, probably. You have to be discerning.
Yeah.
Pandemic strikes.
Yes.
What do I do?
Right.
Who do I talk to? Is that kind of?
Yeah, that one's a tough one, because I don't think you usually have enough expertise out there.
Not a lot of people were around in 1917 that are still with us.
Yeah,
That's true.
But I guess that's a good example in that. I guess the way I would say it is that some people that are leaders process a matter, and I saw this sometimes in Sacramento. Like, you'd look at your briefing sheet for your bills, and I can understand if on the 3 most busy days and all year, and as a state legislator, you'd vote for hundreds of bills in a day, right?
Really?
And so I can understand how some people just boil it down to who's supporting it and who's against it.
Right. Makes it a lot easier.
And am I on this team or am I on this team? Right. I think that's sloppy, because the way I put it, the bad guys are right some of the time.
Right.
They may not be right most of the time, but sometimes they're right. And so so when I approach something like the pandemic, I'm trying to increase empathy at the time when people's generally empathy is going away. Like most of the time in natural disasters, like the debris flow, people's empathy poured out. Their hearts got big.
Right.
But the pandemic, because everybody's affected, at least in a small way, it has caused people's empathy to drop. And in my staff and some agencies, they could track the empathy right with surges and downturns of transmissions. Right?
Really?
Oh yeah. When transmissions are high, people's empathy are rock bottom. And as the numbers get better, the normal human empathy comes back. And right now, it's come back in Santa Barbara. But and to me, part of empathy is trying to go, you know what? You might be mostly concerned about losing your life. This person over here might be mostly concerned about not having a job and not being able to provide for their family. And this person over here might be mostly concerned with the fact that their kid might never catch up after losing an education for a couple years. And to me, the recognition that all of those concerns are are valid.
Right.
And that while you have to make some policy decisions that advantage one over another, that you've got to try to maximize all of those factors to the greatest degree that you can. I won't tell you that that's been easy, but I think if people approach it with more empathy, not just decision makers, but the public itself, then we'll be able to get through this and be better for it as a nation.
Yeah. You're talking about the climate we've been in, which was bad enough before George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. How did you process all of that and kind of juggle? I mean, this was just an unprecedented set of circumstances. Not to mention we're in an incredibly divisive national election at the same time.
Right.
But how did you get through that and be able to inspire, try to unify, but also tell the truth?
Well, I'm very sad that it took people dying
Right.
to remove that blind spot in people's minds. But it, for me, it was and I think for a lot of black and brown people around across the country, it was a feeling of relief that people could actually talk about it and recognize it. Again, it's sad that it takes such tragic deaths to make that happen, but I've always loved this community, but in the past, it's a community that if you said we need more diversity and leadership, people would only look at that through the lens of gender. They would not look at that through the lens of race, economic class, or religion, for that matter. I think diversity is all of those things. Diversity, inclusion is all of those things, and I think it's a torturous path that we are on to reach a point where we can talk more about inclusion in the country and hopefully create more inclusion in the country. But at least we are on a path where that's possible.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's insightful. We're way over time, and I haven't even started with my questions yet. But let's do a little lightning round.
Sure.
Okay, because we're out of time. I'm just going to say something, and you just give me whatever comes to your mind. Have you done
long-winded responses? Or
no, Doss, you're a really interesting person. You're even more interesting than I remember you over those dinner conversations 15 years ago.
Thanks, Sam.
So this is great. We're having a great time. How to treat opponents.
Yeah, I would say that one of the things I'm most proud of in my time in politics is that I have former foes and rivals that are friends and supporters.
Love it. Forgiveness.
It's a hard road, man, but there's no middle ground in my faith and belief system. It's a demand, not not optional. But I also think that there's a selfish reason to be forgiveness. I mean, if you practice forgiveness in your work life and in your it makes it easier to practice it in your personal life. And forgiveness in your personal life will keep you married, will keep your kids loving you more, will enable you to have contact and rewarding contact with that weird uncle or aunt that you just don't know how they could have voted for whoever, right? You know, I mean, it's forgiveness does a lot for life.
It's powerful. Just wait till you have to ask your kids for forgiveness.
Oh,
that's coming.
I already do.
Oh, you already
man.
do that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, then you know. That becomes a whole new world. Hope.
I see it everywhere, and for people who don't have hope, you ought to read some history, because countless generations of human beings lived in a far darker world than we live in, and toiled in a far darker world than we live in, and the revolution in human ethics and belief systems that has taken place in the last 2,000 years, to me, is stunning. Doesn't mean that we're always making progress. Sometimes we make some steps backwards, but we are blessed to live in this day and age, and we are blessed to have people who led us out of belief systems that essentially, for most of human history, the only people who mattered were the people on top. And the role of early Christianity, early Islam, and before that, Zoroastrianism and Judaism, prophetic Judaism, in changing that paradigm for the whole world, to me, is breathtaking.
Wow. America. Last one.
Oh, man. For me, it's as personal as, my grandfather was a Indonesian sailor in the Dutch Royal Navy, and he was a POW for between the age of 17 and 21 in first in Makassar, then in Nagasaki. So he fought alongside a lot of Caucasian people, Dutch, British. His first experience with Americans was the first time, with Caucasian Americans, was the first time he had ever had an experience where he was treated as something like an equal. Right? And look, that was America at that time, who had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Jim Crow South, massive racism in the military and throughout society. And it still was something unlike anything my grandfather had ever experienced.
Interesting.
And that's why my family came here. That's why I exist. I exist because America is a dream and a hope and a promise slowly being fulfilled.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, brother. It's good to be with you.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.